January 1933. Adolf Hitler has taken power in Germany. He has got there by promising to be a man of peace. He has barely even mentioned the Jews. But now he can pursue his real agenda and rid Germany of his long-standing enemies.
The Jew was the enemy within, and the great Hitler, the great leader, was now pointing that out.
But not all Germans are behind him.
Many were upset by the ill treatment of Jews.
So he must find a way of capturing their minds to turn them to his way of thinking. This is the story of how Hitler and the Nazis bend an entire people to his will and groom them into participating in the most evil regime in history. A month after coming to power, a nervous Adolf Hitler takes to the airwaves. It is his first ever radio address to the German people. Germany is in the grip of the Great Depression. Faltering at first, he describes just how serious the situation is.
The misery of our people is horrible to behold. Millions are unemployed and starving.
Hitler explains that the task ahead is massive.
Germany is suffering from the most severe crisis in the standard of living it has experienced in the entire history of the country. There are hundreds of thousands of people homeless.
Some third of the workforce is unemployed, and the knock-on effects of that in terms of poor food, family conditions, work conditions, all suffer.
There is clearly a need to come up with some kind of big bang solution to unemployment.
Hitler had won power by promising to make the economy his priority.
The Nazi slogan was Brot und Arbeit, bread and work, basic things that the Germans had grown accustomed not to having, they promised to restore.
The task with which we are faced is the hardest which has fallen to German statesmen within the memory of man.
He signs off by asking the people to give him 4 years to achieve his goals.
He said, look, we will do what we've promised, but we need time to do so. So please give us Geduld, be patient.
But what many German people don't realize is that economics is not what really concerns Hitler. He has long-standing ambitions, which he fails to mention in his speech. Ideological obsessions dating back to his experiences in World War I and the 1920s, expressed through his writings in Mein Kampf. First and foremost, he wants to rid Germany of the Jews.
He built the party on rabid anti-Semitism.
He sees them as a global, malevolent force with no sense of nationhood, who are to blame for Germany's crisis.
This great Jewish plot to take over the world, and we Germans are suffering from that. It's an international movement, but we in Germany, because of our grim conditions post-war, we are the victims. So our way forward is to get rid of the Jew.
Within weeks of taking power, rather than tackle unemployment, Hitler targets the Jews. A nationwide boycott of Jewish-owned shops and businesses sees brown shirts man the blockade. But it doesn't go well. The reaction of the majority of Germans is not as expected. They keep going to Jewish-owned shops. The German people simply aren't interested in Hitler's brand of anti-Semitism. A report from an American diplomat in Leipzig summarizes the effect of the boycott, describing it as
unpopular with the working classes and the educated circles of the middle classes.
The blockade is called off after just one day. The clear lesson for Hitler is that if he is to win over the Germans to his way of thinking, then he must first gain their confidence and do something about the economy. As a result, he won't mention the Jews again for 4 more years.
This isn't because he's gone soft on the Jewish question, but because he knows that politically there's more to be gained by a softer approach than by a harder line. He remains resolutely anti-Semitic, but publicly he's careful not to make that a major plank in his programme. It's for public consumption, essentially, the apparently softer line.
Along with his propaganda mastermind, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler devises a new plan to win the hearts and minds of his population. They unveil a nationwide battle for work, financed by a 1 billion Reichsmark economic revival program.
He draws up plans for road building, for construction works, for training young men who are unemployed, training them in ways which are socially desirable.
A massive, high-profile construction drive begins. Goebbels makes sure the propaganda cameras capture the Führer leading from the front.
Hitler himself makes a great show of appearing on building sites, moving earth.
The centerpiece are the autobahns which form the backbone of their propaganda campaign. The idea is to link Germany with 6,000 new kilometers of gleaming roadway.
The Autobahn is the symbol of growth. It's a symbol of bigger thinking. It's a symbol of outwardness. We're going somewhere, and we're doing it physically through our road system.
The promise is that ordinary Germans can travel freely and explore their nation.
Germans got very excited, as you might say they still are today, about the idea of driving on motorways, of exploring their own fatherland.
It looked like a vision of the future. It felt like a brave new world.
Critically, these projects require large numbers of workers.
A lot of these constructions involved unimaginable numbers of manual labour, so they were really large-scale work creation schemes.
So let's ask the young men who were unemployed and listless and rootless, let them be the pioneers who build the motorways, build the Autobahn. So they will be contributing something very positive and valuable to the growth of Germany, as well as earning good money for themselves.
Next, Hitler reforms the inefficient German labour market with another policy. His answer is the new German Labour Front, the Deutsches Arbeitsfront.
On the surface, the Labour Front is the new form of trade unionism. They would work together, wage rates, income, profits would be discussed communally, and compromises reached that would benefit everybody.
Ostensibly, it looks like labour reform, but it is actually a smokescreen that allows Hitler to take on a new target: the trade unions. Prior to coming to power, he has always seen them as communists, an enemy almost as hated as the Jews. He also thinks they are a threat to the status quo of the nation, placing too much power in the hands of the workers. So he shuts the trades unions down. Their leaders are arrested, and their funds stolen. All other unions are outlawed. Employment or trade becomes impossible without a membership card.
It was the control of the workforce from above. It was the Nazi determination not to allow workers to be a disruptive element in German society.
A year in, Hitler's regime is going to plan. He is seen as a man of action, selflessly dedicated to getting the nation working again. He is offering a modern, exciting vision of the future, and is successfully steering Germany out of a crisis. Unemployment is in sharp decline, down to 4 million from 6 million. But the economic program is just the first phase. The next step is to take the message of Nazism into every aspect of people's lives. Hitler realizes that if he is to push through his own agenda, he must first capture their hearts and minds. Hitler's belief in accomplishing this is unwavering.
Hitler had such a strength of will. He said to one friend, "You will see, we will do the impossible, we will work wonders, we will accomplish miracles."
His faith in what his Nazi party can achieve is equally unshakable.
Only the Nazi party has sufficient drive, purpose, understanding, and belief in itself to make this a reality.
So he sets about a bold new keynote policy. Its name is the Volksgemeinschaft, the People's Community. A social engineering project of epic proportions. Its goal is simple: to tie everybody into believing in Nazism and accepting its values.
Volksgemeinschaft is the notion of a special people in a special nation. Very powerful notion that Germany was special, and the Volk defined that special quality. The Volk, therefore, was the term used to describe the German people at their best.
Discover the past with exclusive military history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all on History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to watch everything, from the gripping story of the Band of Brothers to Operation Barbarossa and D-Day. Immerse yourself in the dramatic stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
Hitler's line is that only when the German people come together and move forward as one, would the community achieve great things and find its way out of the crisis.
The national community finding its divinely ordained destiny was one of Hitler's favorite phrases. It's there in all of his speeches. It's repeated endlessly by other key orators such as Goebbels. That emotional sense of coming together, of sharing a communal spirit, of being united by the exciting zeitgeist of a new era, but also sharing the sacrifices, standing together in solidarity in hard times, is part of this community spirit that the Nazis are so effective at mobilizing and celebrating.
At the head of the community is the Führer, tirelessly dedicating himself to the needs of the German people. The Volksgemeinschaft is designed to be modern, exciting, and fun. A celebration of Germany's greatness. New national days like the Day of Solidarity and the Führer's birthday create the sense of an uplifting national community. They bring people together in celebration. Critical to the Volksgemeinschaft idea is that it takes the message of Nazism into all areas of German life, even to the dinner tables of Germany.
For example, there was the one-pot stew Sunday. The idea was that people would not eat meat on Sundays. Traditionally, on Sunday, you would have a roast. But instead, they would donate the money that was saved to a public scheme, a welfare scheme to help the poor. And then there would be get-togethers where people would eat together a one-pot stew without meat.
The Sunday meal is no longer a family affair, but a part of a wider communal effort for the German cause.
The idea that families weren't simply units individually, they were part of a greater community. And that individuals took their worth, not from their individuality, but from their collective membership, or their membership of the collective.
To help foster the Volksgemeinschaft, the Nazi Party permeates all levels of society.
National Socialism infiltrates all kinds of areas of daily life, whether it's in voluntary organizations or in professional life. People came into contact with representatives of National Socialism.
Nazism now becomes present at every stage of a German's life. Youngsters in particular are targeted to make them subscribe to the vision.
What Nazism tried to do was try to become the political wing of the German people as a whole. And if you're going to do that, you're not necessarily going to convince the older generation. But what you can do is start absorbing the younger generation into your movement. So if everything you do is through or for the party, then you will become a good little Nazi. So what's the best way of doing that is don't have a Boy Scout movement, have a Hitler Youth movement.
Abolishing, while he did it, similar rival youth organisations like the Boy Scouts and various Catholic and Protestant religious clubs and groups. They all were put together into a Hitler Youth for boys and young men and a Bund Deutsche Mädchen, a League of German Girls for young women.
Central to the sense of communal identity are uniforms.
Uniforms are a fantastic vehicle for bringing people together as a group, for giving them that sense of belonging to a special community.
These new Nazi organizations are fun. For the first time, youngsters can explore their fatherland and taste adventure. Weddings were Nazified too. Newlyweds receive a copy of Mein Kampf on their marriage day. The party's reach even extends to the workplace. A massive workers' movement, Strength Through Joy, is launched to offer benefits to workers, like trips and holidays.
Strength Through Joy was one of the most successful Nazi organizations in propagandistic terms, providing leisure programs for workers, helping them to relax, to enjoy life, and simultaneously to indoctrinate them into the spirit of fascism.
They're allowed to go on holidays at 50% below the market rate. Cruise liners are created as well. Also, state-of-the-art canteens are built in every factory. Even little orchestras go on tours around these factories as well.
The propaganda message is clear. The Nazi Party will look after you and offer you a world of promise. The Germans buy into this dream of exciting new opportunities. But what they may not realize is that all this is part of Hitler's secret agenda. Because there is a flip side to the Volksgemeinschaft. Hitler's vision differentiates clearly between those who are inside the community, and therefore of pure German blood, and those who are outside it, like the Jews.
It was also powerful because it had a very clear barrier between those who belonged to the national community and those who didn't. So it made you feel valued, and it had easy scapegoats that you could blame problems on when they were not part of the national community.
That is why the Jews could not be part of the folk. It was exclusive, because it was Aryan, it was principled, and it related to the glorious past and offered the glorious future.
The Volksgemeinschaft is the first stage in a slow process of capturing Germans' minds and making them view the Jews as an underclass. In time, Hitler and his inner circle will use this to make the Germans complicit in appalling crimes. But for now, they must remain patient. After a year in office, Things are looking good for Adolf Hitler. He is turning around the economy, creating an exciting new social model for Germany, and opening up the country via the autobahns. Above all, he is getting Germans working again.
Unemployment falls by 33%. So this is something that he can trumpet towards his supporters and say, look, I fulfilled one aspect of my programme. Unemployment is going down.
The official line is that unemployment is down due to flagship schemes like the autobahns. In fact, another force is at work. Many of the new jobs are down to something else. Hitler is secretly preparing for war. Starting in 1933, the Nazi regime spends huge amounts of cash on weapons. 35 billion Reichsmarks. It dwarfs all other forms of public spending, including all the work creation schemes. It fits into another part of Hitler's real agenda. In his mind, war with Russia is not only unavoidable, it is necessary. Ever since the days of Mein Kampf, it is Hitler's profound conviction that communism is a threat to the world. He regards it as part of an international Jewish plot, and he thinks an armed showdown with Russia is inevitable.
Hitler's ambition, or his expectation, if not ambition, is that at some point there'll be a war. The Soviet Union will have to be faced down militarily at some point. Our first duty is to rearm, to make the nation strong through military means.
Rearmament will also allow him to realize another of his aspirations conceived years earlier. The idea of Lebensraum, or living space, which he believes is essential for the German nation to grow.
Lebensraum is the idea of living space, that Germany really has too high a density of population. There are too many people occupying too small a space, and therefore that's restricting Germany's economic development, especially in industry, but mostly in agriculture.
For Hitler, territorial space will solve the nation's economic problems and help feed his people. And he believes the land he needs can be seized from those he views as inferior.
From Poland on, Europe was Slav, and the East is Slav, therefore we have the entitlement to take it over. So Lebensraum, living space, which we Germans need, will be found most prominently in the East. As a superior people, they could take land occupied by inferior people.
The problem that Hitler faces is that any talk of going to war to win land is appalling to most Germans. He has been elected as a man of peace who promised not to go to war. Memories of the horrors of World War I are still fresh in people's minds. 2.4 million of their countrymen were killed. Hundreds of thousands were wounded. So this presents Hitler with a problem: how to sell rearmament to the Germans. He comes up with a justification. It's not about preparing for war, it's about the restoration of German pride.
So this is a great program. It's not suffering, fellow Germans. It is an advance towards our providential destiny, the greatness, the restoration of the greatness of Germany.
Rearmament, Hitler says, is an antidote to the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles. Signed by the Allies in 1919, the Versailles Treaty is when the Allies made Germany pay for World War I. It also restricts the size of the German armed forces.
Germany was required under Versailles settlement to limit its armaments production and to limit its army to 100,000 only. But he calculated, correctly as it turned out, that if he pushed hard enough, there wouldn't be a response.
In March 1935, Hitler introduces conscription. It is in total defiance of the Versailles Treaty. The army swells from the permitted 100,000 to 500,000 men.
He's allowed to get away with it, and that gives him more and more confidence. So rearmament is a great way of Hitler pushing the boundaries forward.
Publicly, he continues to reassure the people that he doesn't want war. He is rearming for the preservation of peace. In a speech on the 16th of March 1935, he makes this promise crystal clear.
The government renews its resolve before the German folk and before the entire world that it will never stop beyond the bounds of preserving German honor and the freedom of the Reich, and in particular shall never make of the German national arms an instrument of warlike aggression, but an instrument confined exclusively to defense and thereby to the preservation of peace.
However, rearmament does have unexpected results. It costs a fortune and diverts resources from the German population towards the military. Wages are low, and Germans are made to work longer and harder than ever before. All this takes the shine off the carefully constructed dream of a national community that fulfills everyone's aspirations.
Hardship, in a sense, can be enriching or ennobling, is the Nazi line. Don't see hardship as the enemy. But of course, beyond a certain point, if you're asking people to go without, there has to be some reward for it eventually.
Hitler charges propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels with keeping in touch with popular opinion. He does this by sending out secret agents to eavesdrop on conversations and to prepare reports. It's the only effective polling data available in a totalitarian state. What he learns is alarming.
The privations they were undergoing were beginning to bite.
These are unpopular, they cause a lot of muttering in queues, in shops, and gives rise to considerable anxiety on the part of the Nazi regime.
Despite this huge effort to win hearts and minds, it is clear that popular support is fragile. Goebbels and Hitler must find another way to bring the people behind the Nazis. So they come up with a plan to harness dissent and unite Germans against a common enemy. They will blame the economic hardship on the Jews.
The scapegoat notion, the identifiable enemy within, does distract from the internal economic problems, the unemployment problems, which still persist. And if they are to blame for the crisis in the first place, this is simply justice. This is not retribution, this is justice. The Jews have been given what they genuinely deserve.
Nuremberg, 1935. The annual Nazi Party rally. A massive propaganda spectacle held every year.
Nuremberg is important. It was the site from the 20s onwards of the annual Nazi Party rallies.
But as the pageant unfolds, behind the scenes, there's a last-minute rewrite of the rally's keynote speech.
Hitler is desperate to show the party that he's got something big to deliver. And originally it's going to be on foreign policy, but that gets pulled. And a new policy is drawn up.
Instead, this new policy is a raft of anti-Semitic laws.
is the Nuremberg Laws are drawn up as the first major attempt to turn Germany into a racial state, which was Hitler's ambition. And it obviously attacked the Jew within.
The law for the protection of German blood and honor outlaws marriage between Germans and Jews.
Germans were forbidden from marrying Jews, from having any sexual relations with Jews. If Germans were already married to Jews, they were encouraged and allowed to divorce Jews without any problem at all. So they were Nazi racial theories made horrendous flesh.
The Reich citizenship law strips Jews of their citizenship and makes them mere subjects, unlike the rest of the population. They become legal outsiders. However, this leads to unexpected complications.
The Germans couldn't really define who was a Jew and who wasn't a Jew, even though they'd spent years and years and years discussing this question.
So new legislation is drawn up to sort out the confusion and define who exactly is a German and who is a Jew in the eyes of the law.
It laid down that anybody with 3 grandparents who were Jewish was by definition a Jew, and therefore not entitled to full citizenship, not entitled to employment rights, not entitled to legal rights, not entitled to education.
To be a full Jew has grave consequences, but even Germans with only 1 or 2 Jewish grandparents, known as Mischlinge or mongrels, also fall foul of the law.
It's the first clear defining mark of the impossibility of being Jewish and being German.
Faced with this sudden loss of rights, some Mischlinge defend themselves, while other Germans show their support.
Various organizations came into being after the Nuremberg race laws were brought in, largely to defend those Jews who were only just Jews, if one could put it that way, the Mischlinge.
An association of non-Aryan Christians is formed. At one point, it has 80,000 members.
So there's an attempt made to provide protection for Jews. It's the first attempt, really, in Nazi Germany for a non-Jewish organization to present itself as in some way protective.
At this stage, the Nazis tolerate this opposition. Eventually, they will phase it out, because Hitler's laws are accepted by the majority of Germans. They are starting to believe that the Jews are to blame, and the purity of the German folk comes before the rights of the Jews. Seven months after the Nuremberg race laws, Hitler is making progress, but he still hasn't completely captured the hearts and minds of the German population. Behind the scenes, Hitler plots a new propaganda coup to distract from the economic hardships at home. He plans to appeal once again to German national pride. Hitler decides to send troops back into the Rhineland, an area of eastern Germany that was demilitarized after World War I.
The Rhineland had been a burning issue for Germans since 1918. It was German land which the French occupied, and then, having occupied it, declared that it had to be demilitarized.
At first, his generals don't agree.
Some of his generals warned him, it's too dangerous, mein Führer. The French will react, and the British might join them in the reaction. He grew very angry at this, and he said, I expect National Socialist troops to be on the offensive, not the defensive.
He overrules them and takes a massive gamble. In March 1936, he sends German troops into the Rhineland, breaching the terms of the Versailles Treaty once again.
And it worked. The Rhineland's occupied, happens in a couple of days. The French protest, but they make no move to resist. The risk comes off. It's a great coup.
It makes him a hero in the eyes of his people. Then Hitler finally reveals his true agenda, the preparation for war. He states,
"The German economy must be fit for war in 4 years."
It begins with a very public program of grand schemes, including permanent defensive fortifications and showpiece military buildings. A program of domestic manufacture of essential war materials also begins. These include rubber, oil, and textiles. The idea is that Germany will no longer need to import these vital supplies.
Germany still relies on vast amounts of imports. The best example of that is oil. Germany imported 65% of all its oil. So really, he wanted to find ways of creating synthetic oil, of creating synthetic rubber, so that he could actually finance his rearmament without the need of purchasing vast quantities of overseas oil.
Hitler's most prominent deputy, Hermann Göring, is brought in to run what becomes known as the 4-year plan.
Göring is brought in to produce this so-called 4-year plan, one of the few programs Hitler actually initiated himself.
As part of the plan, the Nazis not only champion synthetic raw materials for war, but also for the German people. They create low-grade consumer products and foodstuffs for Germans. But inside German homes, the crude substitutes for imported goods lead to yet more reports of moaning and discontent. However, on the surface, the propaganda image is one of accessible consumer goods. Not least the motor car. And Hitler gives his people a shiny new goal to aspire to. He champions the Volkswagen, or people's car.
The Strength Through Joy car produced by a Nazi organization. The prospectuses for it were everywhere, and people had these lovely little savings tins that were very brightly colored with pictures of happy families driving around a pretty picturesque German countryside in these new cars.
Very inspiring, very uplifting. The notion that you could have a motor car and you could choose to go out under your own steam, your own choice. We take that so for granted, but for Germans in the 30s, what an ambition to have your own car.
Hitler even sketches the concept for the Volkswagen himself and commissions automotive designer Ferdinand Porsche to make it a reality. Hitler has now been in power for 3 years. Germany looks like a country that is going places. It's showcasing itself on the international stage. It's emboldened and rearmed. The Nazis are offering people new consumer goods and an attractive new lifestyle. But behind the scenes, the country is on the verge of an economic crisis. Recovery and rearmament have required huge quantities of imports. The nation has always been short of foreign currency to pay for these imported goods.
The problem of paying for imports with scarce foreign exchange never leaves the Third Reich. It's a recurring nightmare.
At one stage, the foreign currency reserves are down to crisis levels, with just enough for a week's worth of imports. The reality of the economic situation starts to hit people hard. Food becomes expensive. and there are shortages of clothing and household goods. Few can ever hope to afford the much-vaunted people's car or the other sweeteners trumpeted by the Nazi propaganda machine.
There was a real fear by 1937 that German workers were becoming disgruntled through the relative decline in their wages. They weren't getting what they'd been expected to receive, and they weren't getting what they'd been promised.
However, one thing saves Hitler and his party. World events come to their aid. In 1937, international trade starts to pick up. The global economy recovers over the next 12 months.
It's a worldwide phenomenon. The economy in Europe picks up, and Germany, along with other countries, begins to feel the benefits in employment terms of the pickup. That's the luck that Hitler and the Nazis have.
For Hitler's inner circle, it's a huge relief. They have turned the corner. From the brink of collapse, it begins to look like the plan is working. Germany's coffers start to refill. The Third Reich can once again afford to feed its population. Crucially, unemployment goes down to virtually nothing. It allows Hitler to seem like an economic genius.
Economic recovery is tied to political strength, or the notion of the leader. It's the Führer who's done it. Without the Führer, there wouldn't be this recovery. He's now this elevated leader, this figurehead that one can take pride in. The man who's led Germany out of the crises.
With his credibility restored, Hitler now believes he can ratchet up racial policy to a new level of persecution against his old foe, the Jews. In 1937, Hitler mentions the Jews for the first time in 4 years. He tries out the line he will later use to justify the Holocaust, that the Jews are the cause of their own misfortune.
He openly attacked Jewry as the cause of German difficulties, and he implies very strongly the Jews have a recompense facing them, given that they are trying to destroy the attempts of the new German movement, the new Nazi movement, to better Germany, to improve Germany, to elevate Germany. But Jewry is plotting to destroy that. The Jew was the enemy within, and the great Hitler, the great leader, was now pointing that out.
In 1938, 2 key organs of the state become involved in racial legislation. Now the secret police and Gestapo are unleashed on the Jews.
Jews are abused verbally. They let it be known that they're anti-Jewish, that they're out to get the Jews. So there's that intimidation in the air. They let it be known they are marked people. That's the Gestapo technique for frightening. So the SD essentially do the intelligence work. The Gestapo do the putting on the frighteners.
In the face of such pressure, over 250,000 German Jews leave the country. Often, their possessions and wealth is seized and used to fund the Nazi Party's own budget. But half of Germany's Jews remain. To apply more pressure, persecution goes a step further. Jewish businesses are Aryanized. The decree for the registration of Jewish property further excludes Jews from economic life. They are banned from owning businesses. They have to sell them to Aryan Germans at knockdown prices. Then, Goebbels plots a new course of action that will take all this a stage further. His idea is to have a national day of outpouring of violence against the Jews. It will become known as Reichskristallnacht. He even has a perfect justification: the shooting of a German diplomat, Ernst vom Rath.
This provided a welcome excuse for the Nazi state to unleash a torrent of anti-Semitic violence on German cities.
It had been pre-planned. All they wanted was a pretext, and the assassination was the pretext.
There is a torrent of violence. The Nazis attack Jewish properties and businesses.
Homes are ransacked, synagogues are smashed. The term Kristallnacht, crystal night, comes from the sound of the image of the breaking glass.
Crowds, urged on by the SS, wrecked German shops and smashed the plate glass and store windows and attacked and brutalized and beat up Jews.
Night of the Broken Glass was the natural culmination of a political party and a regime that preached violent anti-Semitism.
1,000 synagogues are burnt. 7,000 businesses destroyed. 91 Jews killed. 30,000 sent to concentration camps. To cap it all, Goebbels' propaganda peddles the line that the Jews brought it all upon themselves.
Kristallnacht is blamed on the Jews. And it said that people rose up in their anger against the Jews and attacked them. And that's the way Goebbels put it in his propaganda. It was a popular movement of the people. We know, of course, it would work the other way.
By the end of 1938, from a Nazi perspective, their policies are a success. Hitler has won the people's hearts and minds, and he has groomed them to his way of thinking. For the first time, the Germans can see what Hitler's anti-Semitism really means, and they are starting to embrace it.
Perhaps the most interesting and most worrying feature about that one night in November was the willing participation of many ordinary civilian bystanders in the violence.
It was an open demonstration of the bestiality and the hatred that the Nazis held for their Jewish population, and an awful warning of worse to come.
At last, Hitler has the German people where he wants them.
So there's a sense that this is a new dawn, a new age that provides exciting new opportunities for a lot of people who are very happy to go along with the violence that accompanies all of this.
Germany has been rearmed. Hitler's enemies, like the Jews, can be persecuted with minimal resistance. Now, he is ready for war.